Well, hello. Thank you very much for coming. Today we have Miguel, who has been invited by our group in Fibio to join a couple of days with us and work and talk a little bit. Well, he's Ramón y Cajal Assistant Professor of the School of Physics in the Universidad Complutense de Madrid. He's interested in very diverse themes, but basically resume in the physics of the cloud networks and the theory of machine learning and its connections with human learning. So, well, thank you very much, Miguel, for coming here and being so nice to all of us. I'll let you go.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anna. Yeah, thank you all for being here. It's been, I know this is like the typical thing to say, but it's been really a pleasure to be here. I guess everybody says it, but you know, it's a wonderful place. I have a lot of fun, like talking to many of you. And yeah, I hope that hopefully I can come again. But I'm really enjoying the experience. So, as Anna said, today I'm going to talk about flow networks, but she mentioned that I also have other interests. I thought it would be good maybe to mention them, just in case you have this other common interest with me, but I will not talk about them today. I also do machine learning. So about machine learning, I was interested in some theoretical aspects. I come from physics and statistical mechanics and so on. So if you think about many problems in machine learning and basically optimizing some cost function, like a landscape, energy landscape, if you wish, and we think about how to change this landscape to improve learning and things like that. So this is like more from the theoretical side. Also maybe connected to some topics that some people have commented with me just before entering the room, is like we apply also machine learning, or we use it as a model to understand physical systems. We have applied them to active particles. Maybe we can collaborate at some point with the group here, trying to infer properties of the environment, like viscosity or interaction between agents, using like some algorithms that we already developed. And right now we are working on understanding collective behavior. So we have like this kind of video game that people are playing, and we are also preparing experiments with mice to look at collective behavior of humans and animals. And we are using reinforcement learning algorithms to try to model the behavior. But we have just preliminary results. So today I will not be able to tell you much, but you know, maybe in a year, hopefully I can come again. I will pay my trip, but you know, it will be nice. But today, you know, I want to tell you about this other topic that really interests me. I will tell you about a result that we already have published, but also at the end of the talk, I will tell you about paper that we are basically about to submit, and we are very excited about the results, and I would like to know your opinion, feedback, suggestions. So okay, like why nonlinear flow networks? So what is it? What does it mean nonlinear here for me, right? So we were motivated by different examples in nature that exhibit some kind of nonlinearity in the flow as with respect to the pressure difference that you apply, right? For example, in the xylem tracheids of some plants, right? In this case, this type of tree, you have this structure here that is called a pit pore, where you have an elastic membrane. Probably some of you know much more than me about this, but you know, I hope you will still agree on this, that you have like this elastic membrane with some porosity. So when the pressure difference is small, you know, the pressure is actually lower at the top. And that's why the xylem is what is taking the water from the ground to the leaves, right? So the water is going up. When the pressure difference is small, the flow will go through these pores, and the flow will increase as you increase the pressure difference. But when the pressure difference increases more, then the elastic membrane will close this hole on this kind of rigid plate. And then what you actually get is like a decrease in the flow. And you get like these nice experimental results for different type of plants, where you see how increasing delta P first increases the flow, and then decreases, and then increases again as you keep increasing. At some point you break the active pore, right? So we were very intrigued about that. you would agree with me that this is highly nonlinear, right? The relation between the flow and the pressure difference is highly nonlinear. And you can see this kind of relation in other systems, like the arterioles or the arteries in the brain of some mammals, right? What you can do is actually you can take an artery, remove it from the brain of a rabbit, control the pressure difference, measure the flow, and what you see again, they actually, in the paper, they plot it in different magnitudes. They plot flow response is actually the radius of the arteriole, and the shear stress is the shear stress inside, but we can replot this data as a flow versus pressure difference, and again, we see like this highly nonlinear behavior. And the most important or the most intriguing thing for us is like in the sample that I showed you, there is like this negative slope that we will call during the talk negative differential resistance, right? Like because as you increase delta P, flow is actually decreasing, which is kind of counterintuitive, but it can happen, right? So it's like a negative resistance, right? It's not a positive slope; it's a negative slope. So, okay, this is why we are interested about nonlinear flow networks. And now in my title, there is also this collective phenomena, right? Like a topic. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about collective phenomena. And the simplest example that came to my mind is magnetization, right? So when you have a ferromagnet, for the ones that are not physicists, don't worry, it's basically you have a bunch of spins that they are like arrows, and you can impose an external magnetic field. And magnetization is that you are basically looking at how the arrows are aligning to each other. Right? And the only important thing that I want you to think is that you have a response that actually depends on the past, depends on the protocol, right? So if you are here for this magnetic field, you can have like two values, right? But actually, depending on what you do, imagine that you stop here, now you decrease the magnetic field, and now you will be on this different hysteresis loop. So actually, for the same value of magnetic field, you can have like different values of the magnetization that is giving you information about the past, right? Like if I tell you that for this value of the magnetic field, you are in this point, you know actually you come from here, right? Or if you are here, you come from there. So this multi-stability is telling you something about the past. You are, in a way, encoding or storing like very simple memories, right? So to me, if I want, I have nonlinear flow networks, I want to look at the collective phenomena, and one simple example would be to look for memories. So how are we gonna do this? Like, my goal would be to build like, a flow network, like a bunch of valves, and flow is going through and control the pressure difference. And I would like to get something like this. I would like that the flow as a function of delta P has different possibilities. Each of these possibilities probably depends on the protocol that I apply, like the past, right? So I'm storing some memories in a way. But for the ones of you that know about fluid dynamics, if we are in a Stokes flow where there is no inertia, no turbulence, let's say like the equations are very simple, right? Like the equations are actually linear. So if I tell you the boundary condition, if I tell you the pressure, this is a rigid channel. If I tell you the pressure in this side and the pressure in that side, the solution is unique, right? So no matter what you did in the past, I tell you the boundary condition, you shouldn't be able to tell me anything about the past, right? Like you shouldn't be able to store any memory, right? But this is true because I draw these two black lines, right? Because this is a rigid wall. If you consider like a soft material around, that's not true anymore, right? There are like different ways to think about that. Like there is like this classic paper with the scallop theorem and so on. There are like more recent papers that discuss this kind of thing. But hopefully today I will show you one example that you will understand why you can have like Stokes flow. You can have like the same boundary conditions for pressure, but because you have like soft valves in the middle, you have like multiple possible solutions, and you can store memories, right? How can we do this, right? Okay, let's build a simple nonlinear element, let's say. We saw like this artery and this pit pore from the plants, but we are gonna build our own in the lab, let's say. And this is like simply like two elastic plates like this, right? So I will control the pressure at the entrance and at the exit. And they will control how much the valve deforms. And basically we see this, and the reason why this valve is doing that is similar to the pit port that I discussed before, when the background color is the pressure. So right now there is like a very low pressure drop. So we are here. So as you increase the pressure drop, this flow is going to increase. But at some point, the two valves are deforming, like the two plates are deforming, and the valve is kind of closing. So if you want to think about this, this is like a narrow channel, right? So this is like your resistance is increasing. That's why you're actually going down. And then as you keep increasing the pressure difference, and the background color here, the flow goes up again. So we have, in a very, very simple way, right? We have like this very nonlinear relationship between flow and pressure difference. And this is a very important point. People who know about the dynamical system and so, like sometimes they see like this negative differential resistance and they say, oh, aha, like there is like an instability here. Not yet, right? Like this element is completely stable, right? Like you take delta P up and down and you will always be here, right? There is no multi-stability there, right? It's just very nonlinear, right? But now we want to get this collective phenomenon, right? Like we want to put, yeah.
Sorry, is this simulation?
Yeah, this is a COMSOL simulation. Stokes flow, like no inertia, like elastic solid and so on. Yeah, great. Yeah, please, any verification is really welcome. So, okay, if we want to look at collective phenomena, let's put many of them together, right? Like, and look, let's see what happens. But if we put many of them together and we use a rigid wall, even if these things are flexible and if our fluid is incompressible, we are actually constrained, right? Like we are obliged to have the same flow everywhere. So all of them are going to behave in the same way, right? Like they are forced to do the same thing because you cannot have a mismatch in flow, right? So what can we do? Like to give some more freedom to the system such that other richer phenomena can emerge, we can put like some elastic solid around. So now you can have a larger flow here and a smaller flow there, and these two valves are doing different things. But if that's happening, the volume will increase because because of mass conservation, and then because volume increases, this external elastic wall is gonna deform. But when it deforms, because of elasticity, basically pressure will increase there, and actually depending on the geometry and elastic properties of the solid, pressure will actually may change in the neighborhood, right? So now you start to see how everything's gonna get coupled to each other, right? Because the flows change the volume, volume changes the pressure, pressure changes the flow, and now everything is coupled. Hopefully we'll see something interesting, right? So let's make a very simple mathematical model. It's basically what I just told you, but with a few equations. Every time that we think on a system like this, in our mathematical model, we convert it to a flow network. It's basically a network with nodes and edges. Every node for me is the region in between two valves where we measure volume and pressure. And then every edge in the network is basically, it corresponds to one of the valves, right? So on the edges, we have flows that are a function of the pressure difference, as we saw before, like some nonlinearity. With this, it's important to have like this region of negative differential resistance for what we are doing. We have another equation that couples volume and pressure. This is completely phenomenological, and we can discuss later why to use this expression or not. But the only thing that I want you to think right now is that, okay, this is the graph Laplacian. In the continuous limit, this will be the Laplacian. Basically, what you can think is that this is like a Poisson's equation for electrostatics, right? In other words, if you have a volume accumulation here, pressure will increase in the same region and will also increase in the neighborhood, and it will decay, right? And the decay and so on, it depends on this alpha parameter. So it's very phenomenological, right? Like we have some reasons why to use this expression, like we did some simulations for the elastic solid, how a deformation of the elastic solid couples or produces a stress on the boundary that does the pressure. But so far so good, like let's think on this as a phenomenological equation. And the last equation is basically mass conservation or volume conservation, right? If we have more flow going in than out, the volume there will increase, right? But now, as I said, right, like the flows changes the volume, volume changes pressure, pressure changes the flow, and everything is coupled, and you have a dynamical system, a system of ODEs, which are nonlinear, and they are coupled to each other.
I was wondering why the slope of in the first plot, right side on the top, why the slope of the increasing part looks different?
Like this
Yes.
slope from this one.
Yes, shouldn't it be same?
It depends on the geometry, actually. Like we can play with them. If you play with the geometry and the elasticity of the valve, you get different shapes. Let's say I don't know if I have a slide, but I can show you later. Like we play with the geometry, like the rest angle of this valve. Let's say, like at rest, if they're like this or like this or like this, the length, right? Basically, you have to make them the right length, right? If you make them too long, they will touch. If you make them too short, you will not even get the decreasing flow, right? So yeah, I mean, like, as I said, like this is a simulation, right? Like here, okay, you could say that they look more similar, but we have other examples where they look more different. So it depends on yeah, thank you. Okay, I tried to get rid of all the analytical results because also I want to show you a lot of things, and I know I shouldn't take too much time, but I will tell you just so that you have an intuition of why like things get unstable here and so on. So imagine that you have a system like a network with many of these valves in series, and you are controlling delta P for the whole system. So this is the pressure difference between the entrance and the exit. When you are on this branch for all the valves, all of them are doing the same. And you could think that, okay, if you have this delta P for all the valves, this could be homogeneously distributed for all the valves, and they would be all doing the same, right? So it would be this configuration. But what happens, right? Imagine that you have a small perturbation. What would be a small perturbation would be, let's say, in this region, these walls, there's a little bit more volume there. If there is a little bit more volume, the pressure will increase exactly in that point, right? And if pressure increases here, delta P, because delta P is decreasing from left to right, delta P in this point decreases, and delta P in this point increases, right? But you are in a very special case, in a very special region where the slope is negative. So decreasing delta P means that the flow actually increases. And increasing delta P means that the flow actually decreases, the opposite that you would think, right? So what happens, like, this flow gets even larger and this flow gets even smaller, and this small perturbation explodes, and that's the reason why this solution is unstable. And you can see that we can show this analytically, right? So if this solution is unstable, right? If your valves don't want to be all of them in the same position, what are they gonna do, right? Actually, what they do is the following. You can have the same flow either being all of them here or some of them here and some of them here, right? So the system will divide into domains where you have a lower pressure drop here and a larger pressure drop here, which correspond to these 2 points, but they have the same flow going through, right? They have the same current, let's say. So this is it can be a steady state, a stationary solution of the system. I hope that's more or less clear, because we are gonna play with this a little bit more. So now you have your system divided in these 2 domains, and we can start to look, I don't know if you see it, but it will be more clear that we can start to have like different solutions for the same boundary conditions. So what we will do is, like, we will have like this network again. We are controlling delta P for the whole network, and we are measuring the flow for the whole network. And we are gonna do protocols, like I'm gonna increase it, I'm gonna decrease it, and let's see what happens. And at the same time, I'm gonna try to tell you at the same time what is happening for the whole system, what is the Q that I'm measuring for the whole system, and the delta P that I'm imposing for the whole system, and what is happening to all the valves inside the system. So what is gonna happen is that at the beginning, all of them are happy here, right? Because this is like a stable region, let's say. and I can increase delta P for the whole network. All of them are doing the same thing, and I get this total flow along the system. But once they reach here, they don't want to go here, right? Because this was unstable. So actually what happens, like one by one, they start to jump to the other side. And then you keep increasing delta P for the whole network. And once all of them are here, they are happy to be here, right? So they will go up and you can go down. And what you get is like this other branch where all of them are happy here until they reach the minimum. Then you get the opposite, right? Or one by one, they will jump to the other side and you get this other side of the hysteresis. And actually, imagine that only 5 of them jump to the other side, by the way, like each of these little jumps is one of them jumping to the other side. If 7 of them jump and now you start to decrease the flow, the delta P, you actually travel through these other stable branches. So you have many nested loops, many nested hysteresis loops. And actually, now I hope it's more obvious. You can forget about all the details, right? But I hope this reminds you to the first plot that we saw about magnetization, where for the same value of magnetic field, in our case, like this external pressure difference that we impose, we have different values for the flow. And this, if you know about fluid dynamics and Stokes flow, is kind of counterintuitive because actually we have a different flow and actually a different resistance. And this is related to your question, Sujit, about because we have like a different slope here and here, actually all the lines in between interpole between these two slopes. So actually you can choose the resistance of the global resistance or the effective resistance of the whole system, just playing with how many valves you have in each of the two branches, right? And you do that just playing with the protocol, with the memory, right? Like you just say, okay, I will go up to here and then I will go down and I'm on this branch, but then if I keep going up and then I go down, I will go on the other one. So I don't know if we were, if it was a very good idea, but we call this a fluidic memristor because it's a resistor that has memory, fluidic, so it made sense. But there are a lot of people working on electronic memristors that include fluids, so it leads to confusion. But this was a very simple mathematical model. So you asked before about the simulations and experiments. So before convincing someone to do an experiment, we tried to do a simulation. So we used console. I will not go through to all the questions, but basically the idea is that we are using Stokes flow, so no inertia for the flow, no inertia for the solid, where we have like this elastic medium and these elastic valves, and we have fluid structure interactions. And we see actually what we predicted, and we were very happy about it. So by now, I hope this is more or less clear, but in this plot, we will show the flow through the whole system as a function of delta P for the whole system. And delta P, you can also visualize how pressure decays with this color in the background. This is the pressure for the fluid that is going through. And you will see in the video how the valves are deforming, right? So hopefully you will see that when we are going along this line, all the valves are doing the same. But when they reach the local maximum, let's say, one by one, they jump to the other side, right? And they jump, remember, right? One of them isolated is stable, right? They jump because collectively they are unstable, right? Like one of them is completely happy to go up and down. So, we thought this was convincing. So we were lucky enough to collaborate with an experimental group in Denmark, in DTU. Okay, this is basically telling you again the simulation. So if you stop at this point and you look at the pressure, how it decays, maybe you can see it in the color, how the color decreases more slowly here, and it increases faster here, and we can measure what is the pressure value along this middle line, and we have like these two domains that hopefully you see is basically the same as we predicted from the theory. Right? So you have all these memories, associated to having like the two domains of the valves jumping and so on. And we actually made an experiment. It's not microfluidics because it's centimeters, right? But they were able to create some valves. They tried to do these valves, but they are kind of tricky to do. Maybe you understand better why. But it's actually the same group that did the experiment for the plants that I show you. So they knew a lot about pit pores in plants, and they actually created this artificial pit pore where you have an elastic membrane with a hole here, a rigid plate with another hole, which are not aligned. And then for low pressure drop, you have flow around here. High pressure drop, this membrane closes this hole, but you have a bypass. So actually you get a nice nonlinear response between flow and pressure difference. And when you put all of them together, we get this nice, I would say, hysteresis with the jumps that correspond to the valves jumping. Of course, here we cannot see how the valves jump, right? But now I hope I have convinced you that these jumps will most probably correspond to the valves moving to the other state and so on. So, okay, I'm spending a lot of time, so I will try to go a bit faster. We had other theoretical results that were about what if, okay, now we know what happens if you have all the valves are the same, but what if now we have like different valves with different heights of the maximum and the minima? We can probably store even like more complex memories, but our experimental collaborators were not happy about like producing like this tiny difference between valves. So we found other people who were happy to do it with electronics. So what we did is like, okay, we can do something like the fluidic valve that we discussed, but this would be electric current as a function of voltage difference, and there's like a bunch of transistors behind this, right? Actually, this is mainly Lauren Alman at UPenn, and actually the nice thing about electronics is that it's easy to visualize things, so you can light LED light if they are on this branch, and the light will be off there here. We can put a bunch of these elements in series, and now for the same voltage difference for the whole system, we can store any memory, right? We can prepare the system in a different state, and the only thing we are controlling is V0, right? Like we are to go here, basically you move up and down V0 in a specific protocol until you stop at 12, and you do a different protocol here, up, down, you stop at 12, and you get a completely different state that we understand, right? How you go to one place or another. So, okay, what else? Like this is everything I told you so far. We verified experimentally. Our mathematical model, provides other predictions that we haven't verified experimentally yet. But the prediction would be that when this parameter alpha that was hidden in one of our equations is large enough, this is not a solution anymore. This solution that I told you is a steady state solution, and you can store, memories and so on. It's not a solution anymore. And then, because this solution is unstable and this is not a solution, what does this system do? What it does is actually something similar. It breaks down in 3 domains like this, like low pressure drop, high pressure drop, low pressure drop. But it cannot be stationary. It has to move, and you get like waves that are traveling. So this is a result from the mathematical model. We can do simulations where we have like, with the computer, you can do a lot, right? So you have like this 500 edges network, which periodic boundary conditions. We control, for example, the pressure between this node and this node. And each of the edges, you should imagine each of the edges is like one of these nonlinear elements. And each of the nodes here is like these places where you could store volume and pressure. And we can plot the pressure as the background color here, and the volume as the background color here. So hopefully you will see that the pressure at this point, the color will not change, but it will change everywhere else, right? So you see, like the color here and here doesn't change, but it changes everywhere else. And what you see, like volume is accumulating around until it detaches, and you have like these waves that travels. They travel as this kind of cycle because the system has periodic boundary conditions, and we get these waves and so on that we hope to see in experiments soon, but we still try to convince someone to do it. So I know people do a lot of microfluidics here, so I was hoping, but okay, and this is, I think it comes where I will do a heavy speculation, right? So because someone told me, if you have more biology, like discuss about it, but I was like, yeah, it's very speculative. So I hope nobody gets mad, right? So, okay, I told you at the beginning how in these arterioles and arteries for the brain of mammals, you get this very nonlinear behavior, right? There are experiments that show this. There are other experiments where they are complicated. They basically take a mouse, open the head, look into the neural activity of the brain with some electrodes. They put also a window where they can look at the vasculature, the amount of blood that is inside the vessels, let's say, right? And it's very interesting, right? Because they can measure the correlation between neural activity and what they call blood volume fluctuations, right? So you see, right? Like you look at the vessels, you can, from the optical image, infer how much blood is inside the vessels. You look at what is the neural activity in this region of the brain that actually controls the whiskers of the mouse. And you see that there is a large correlation, right? So it makes sense, right? Like if this region of the brain is very active, you have a lot of blood a little bit later because you want oxygen in that region, right? What is important here, there is a big debate that I don't want to get into, is that even if they, on the video is showing, okay, let me see. I don't know why the video doesn't run more smoothly. I think my computer does anyway. I think it's because of Zoom probably. But you know, if you infuse some chemicals such that you block all the neural activity, you still see blood volume fluctuations. Right? They are smaller than before, and now they are not correlating to neural activity because there is no neural activity, right? So it's not my idea. Like you can find it in this paper, it's by Patrick Drew's lab in Penn State, that there could be other non-neural origin for these fluctuations, right? And I guess our speculation or hypothesis would be that maybe simply by these mechanical nonlinearities or fluid dynamics nonlinearity, there is this collective phenomenon that are these oscillations that I show you that maybe are connected to what is happening in the brain. So anyway, I will stop there. But I have another topic to tell you about that is very related to this, and we are very excited that this, we are about to submit this paper, so if you have comments or suggestions, they're very welcome. Everything that I told you so far, you are controlling the pressure at the boundaries, let's say at the externally for the system, because you need to input energy because you have like these soft valves and viscosity and dissipation. But what if we can inject energy at the local scales, right? So there are like an element, it's called an active pore. You can imagine or think about it as a micro pump. So this is a small element that is pumping fluid one way or the other. Even more interestingly, you can see how it pumps fluid when you impose an external pressure difference. And what it actually does, you know, the details of the physics are there, or we can discuss it, but I don't want to get into them. It's similar to active particles. People who do active particles, it's kind of the same thing. You have catalytic region here that reacts with the fuel, but instead of moving an active particle, the walls are static and you move the fluid, right? And what you actually get is like if you impose zero pressure drop, you can break, there is an instability, so you can break the symmetry left or right. So basically you are pumping fluid left, right or left. If you impose a delta P, if you impose the delta P in the same direction that you are already pumping, you are happy, you go up. If you impose delta P in the opposite direction at which you are pumping, you can still sustain pumping in the same direction until you jump to the other stable branch, and you have an hysteresis. So you have one element that is injecting energy, is pumping fluid at the local scale, and is bistable. And we want to see what happens when you put many of them together. So we will use the same trick. That now it shouldn't be too surprising for you. We will put many of these active elements, and in the middle we will put some elastic units, we call them, basically like some balloons, right? That couple again volume and pressure. So when you have flow going from both sides into this unit, the volume will increase, that will increase pressure, that will change the flows, centric, right? But what we didn't expect is the collective behavior that emerges. We actually were aiming to do like complex networks and so on, but we found something in the ring that we didn't understand, and now we are very happy. So same model as before. Sorry, because I realized that now I call the currents I instead of Q. and we call Q the difference of current getting into a node, something like the net current. So that can be a bit confusing. By same equations as before, like conservation of volume depending on how much current gets into the system, coupling between volume and pressure. Now let's consider it's completely local because we don't have like this external elastic medium. It's basically a tiny balloon. So if volume increases here, pressure increases only here. It doesn't affect the neighbors. And we have the flow, the function that I showed you. And what it happens is the following, right? Like we did this as a naive test. We said, okay, let's initialize these active pores in random directions. And I imagine that we would see some transitory with some fluctuation. And at the end, all of them would be synchronized in the same direction because this is like a trivial solution, right? So we will plot here the pressure in red, the volume in blue, but maybe look at the background because the background is the direction of the active pores. And don't look at here yet. So when you look at the direction of the active pore, you see they are disordered at the beginning, and then we start the simulation, and then it evolves, and we have fluctuations which are disappearing. That is good, but you can see that there are actually two domains. Like one red domain is like they are pumping flow in the counterclockwise direction, and one blue domain that is in the clockwise direction, and they are stable, right? And they are robust. And if I move the video all the way to the end, the fluctuations that were in the background disappear, and now we have something that is like a nice pressure bump combined with a flow domain that travels as a solitary wave, I would say, and it's robust, it keeps a constant velocity, and we can do the simulation very long, it stays there. So we really wanted to understand what is going on. And okay, and this is, as I told you, this is the net current. So what is happening is like, of course, in this region, the flow is going this way. In this region, flow is going this way. So here you have a positive net current. In this boundary here, you have a negative net current. And that's why it's moving in this direction, right? Because you are adding more volume to this boundary and taking volume from the other, and you are kind of moving this thing. But it has to happen synchronously, right? You cannot have one thing without the other. I will, oh, okay. I have a video, guys. Okay, we made this. I want to show you because it took us some time to make the video. But it's the same thing I explained, right? But you could imagine it could be used for something, hopefully, right? Like you have like this solitary wave of these balloons which are inflated and they are moving in a constant velocity in a very robust way. As I told you, I will go through quickly. We understand why it moves to one direction or another. If you have a bump in the pressure or you have a pressure depression, they move in opposite directions. So we can have results where you have like two of these and they are moved that are equivalent, so they move in the same direction, they stay there forever. Or we can have two of them that are like opposite charge, let's say, and they move in opposite directions, and they actually kill each other and annihilate, right? So we see many interesting phenomena. Even more interestingly, if we use the same equation that I told you before, and now we couple the elements to the neighbors, so you should imagine that we are introducing this external elastic medium or coupling the balloons, let's say, to the neighbors. Then we see even more complex behavior where now the height of this solitary wave depends on the parameter. Okay, we call it omega. It's basically the ratio between alpha and gamma. Like if omega is large, like the non-local coupling dominates. If omega is 0, you only have local coupling, right? So we get height depends on omega with a nice power law behavior, and we understand analytically the behavior as a function of omega. It goes as a square root of omega. Yeah, I don't have time to tell you how we got it analytically, but you know, we can discuss later if you're interested. And even more interesting to me, you know, I told you that these solitary waves live forever, but they only live forever in the omega 0 regime, right? When omega is larger than 0, they actually die. So if we initialize, you will not see in the video, but okay, because it's choppy, but it's smooth, and you see how it's decreasing its width until it disappears. So it has a certain lifetime. And when we plot the lifetime as a function of the initial width of this solitary wave, it behaves as an exponential because this is, semi-log plot. But when you take into account different values of omega, you realize that the exponent of this time life as a function of omega, as a function of the initial width depends on omega, and we can also understand the behavior of this exponent analytically. So I think I'm finishing. I think I'm on time. So I wanted to finish with just a final thought that is, I think it's very clear there are like many analogies between flow dynamics or fluidics and mechanics. There is classic theory, there are like, classical analytical solutions to some problems. There is a lot of work, improving numerical methods to find numerical solutions. But from my point of view, in mechanics, maybe the community felt that they wanted to move to different problems, and they moved away from this, or they moved to something else. Whereas in fluid dynamics, there is a lot of interest still in fundamental problems like improving the numerical methods, like improving our understanding of turbulence and so on. So, in mechanics, they move to trying to understand what happens with, you have like complex geometries, like what I would call non-trivial elements. And what happens when you put many of them together, you get like this collective phenomena that people call mechanical metamaterials, right? So I would argue that what we do, like with these non-trivial elements, with these valves, and what happens when you put all of them together, is something that we could call fluidic metamaterials, right? That's it. Finally, before finishing, I wanted to thank my collaborators. I think we had a lot of fun working together. These were the people involved in the fluidic memristor that I told you about at the beginning, like these soft valves and memories. This is the people involved with the electronic experiments that I only told you a little bit, but we have many more results. We are actually connecting our results to all these hysteron field, right? Because it's very related. If you're interested about that, we can discuss more. Everything that I told you about active pores and solitary waves and so on, it was done with these also amazing collaborators. So with this, I want to thank you again for listening and for inviting me. I had a lot of fun, and thank you very much.
Sorry.
No. I'm glad that you
All
asked.
systems that you have mentioned, how susceptible they are to retain their memories due to some random fluctuations?
That's a very good point. Yeah, that's a very good point. Okay, I can tell you several things. So the model that we have done is completely deterministic. There is no noise there, right? We could add it, but so far we haven't added. We have experiment. They work, so I guess for the range of temperature that they use. But of course, this was a centimeter valve, right? Like with the fluid that we were using, it was like water with sugar to increase viscosity. So, probably the thermal fluctuation that you can have in such a system compared to the behavior, I think it's going to be related to, the distance between the maximum and the minimum of the current that you have in one of these nonlinear elements. If you can have fluctuations that are larger than this, let's say, you can have current fluctuations that are larger than the distance between the maximum and the minima, probably you lose this, right? Because your valves will start to jump from one side to the other. But we haven't tried, right? That's a very good point. Also, we have the same, actually, we are thinking the same thing in this system, right? Like, because we have this nice solitary wave and they move and so on, but we have no noise, right? So how robust are they to noise? Would they disappear? How would they diffuse? Like these things, yeah, we want to do it, but we haven't done it. Very good. Thank you.
In trees, do you have similar networks along the interior, along the trunk?
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's why I didn't.
What happens? Any evidence that anything?
That's a very good point. So that's why I typically leave away the biological slides, but it's a very good point. So that's actually what we wanted to do. So our collaborators, they do experiments with pit pores, but basically what they do, they go to a tree, they take out pit pores and they measure in the lab, right? Like they put it in the microfluidic element, like they control the pressure and measure the flow. So it was like, okay, we have this result, like let's go to a tree and let's try to control the pressure difference and measure. But for example, first of all, our result is for a 1D network, like 1D line of these pit pores. And these networks are not 1D, or at least what my collaborator told me is like, it's very difficult. It would be very difficult to do this experiment. I would be very happy to do it, right? Like if any of you do plans and want to try, I would be very happy. But we explored it a little bit, and basically we thought it was hard. So we were trying to do all these things tied to biology before doing the design of the badge that I explained you about, right? Basically, we're trying to connect it or to prove that this is relevant to biology, but we realized it was very hard. So we went the other way and we said, okay, let's build it in the lab. Let's show that it could be useful for microfluidics. Let's go in the route of engineering, let's say, instead of biology. But yeah, I would be super happy. And what could be the advantage of this? Like, I don't know, like they are probably related to cavitation and avoiding like big, but maybe these memory effects are also taking advantage of. Thank you.
And thank you for this really interesting talk. I have one question about the equivalency for the brain that you were like, so what could be an advantage over numerical models, for example? And because if I remember correctly, in numerical models, if you want to model the brain, you have to resolve each channel, let's say like a lattice Bayesian or something. And yours is kind of an equivalent model.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I would say that what we do is like a kind of coarse grain analogy, right? Where we have like, it allows us to study like larger networks because we don't solve for all the details, and we can look at this, large scale behavior. But of course, if that's true in the brain, like hopefully we would be able to decide which are the values of the parameter that you should explore to see this in an experiment or in a careful numerical simulation with all the red blood cells, the elasticity. But like this effect is basically because of muscle construction. So to do a realistic simulation, it would be tricky, right? Because you have to have like the cells, the flow, muscle activity. You have to decide how you correlate muscle activity to shear in the walls. So there is a lot of ingredients, right? But yeah, I would be very, very happy to collaborate and try to do it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for this talk. I have to confess that throughout the talk, I couldn't stop thinking about this metabolic theory of ecology.
Okay.
Which is, I'm not capable to explain it, but basically it tries to explain allometric relationships, why small organisms are less efficient energetically than large organisms, And one of the explanations is that the scaling is because of the delivery systems of nutrients to the small scale, to the cells, So basically
the vessels or
the vessels, from plants or animals, So I was thinking, related to this, have you tried to model like networks of but not like those that you showed with but like networks of vessels?
If we have used like, let's say, experimental data as to get the structure of the network and do the simulation with them.
Yeah, and also if you have thought of trying to do some scaling with this and see how this, if there is any kind of optimal for different different diameters of the vessels or different.
Yeah, that's a great point. So actually, the thing that I told you about the brain is not something random that I just thought of. We try actually to do it. So from Patrick Drew's lab, the experiment that I showed you from the mice, we actually got the data for the network, right? We got the structure of the network, and we repeated this simulation where you can see like these traveling waves going through the network in a network with a with a real geometry and topology. So we didn't finish, right? I hope I could tell you that we have a paper about that, but we stopped. So we didn't look at how it changes with the development or with the scale. That would be very nice. I'm also interested in this kind of topic because of what I mentioned at the beginning of collective behavior and so on. So our hope is also to show something like the scaling that you mentioned of metabolism based on the mass or size of the organism, or right, like that. The bigger you are, the more efficient you are, right? We wanted to show something like that for collective behavior. We are trying to see. But you gave me an idea. I don't know, like I may talk with you later, because we are now starting to do experiments with the chicken embryo, where we, take the chicken embryo and see how, I don't know if you know about this. I didn't know 2 weeks or 3 months ago, I didn't know about it. But when you have the chicken embryo, it has a network of vessels that is almost 2D on top of the yolk. It's called the yolk sac membrane. It's kind of the placenta of the embryo. It's like taking the nutrients from the yolk. And you can see very, very nicely how it grows and how it develops and how it changes structure. So if I wanted to test something like what you said, like how these properties, or what I understood, something of how this property or a global property or some collective property changes with development or scale, I may try there. But we may talk more about, because we actually are looking at this. We are, a colleague of mine in our university is doing the experiments now, and we are developing all the experimental setup, but we don't have a good question yet to answer. So maybe, I don't know, maybe we should have thought more before starting, but it's a good point. I may ask you more.
Any more questions? No? We can do it here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.